Hello everybody and welcome back to the Simply Put podcast show, hosted by me, James, on the YouTube, and, well, it's currently only on YouTube, so let's just jump into it. Today's topic is Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare 2. So it's made by PopCap, the same people who make Plants vs Zombies, you know, the initial PC release of the tower defense-esque type of game. They also made Bejeweled and many of the titles. You know, they have quite a good track record, really. PopCap, they're very straight to the point, very good at what they do. It released in February 23rd 2016 for PlayStation 4, Xbox One and PC. To put it simply, it's a third-person multiplayer character shooter with various modes, campaigns, that sort of thing. It's not, and I stress it's not, a 3D Plants vs Zombies game. It's a third-person shooter with a Plants vs Zombies theme on it. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into the good. And the first thing I want to bring up is that they're willing to try a new thing. Let me just briefly talk about safe games and cashing in, because even though that does work, you know, cashing in and making they could have easily done a Plants vs Zombies 2, which they have done, and they could have done a 3 and a 4. But to change the formula like they have done is quite interesting. And it shows to me anyway, that if you put the effort in anything, it can become anything else, especially in gaming. For example, if Activision one day decided to turn Call of Duty into a turn-based strategy, and they put all their effort and time and money into it, it probably would do well. So I think it is a good show of, if you want to change the genre or the idea or concept of a game, I think it's actually entirely possible if you focus really heavily on it. And that's going to bring me over to the next section, which is, it's what a sequel should be. I think that's a rather broad compliment to throw around, isn't it? So let me briefly talk about what a sequel should do, and I believe it comes down to two factors. One is for the sequel to progress the story, the ideas, the concepts, all that stuff portrayed in the first, and then build on them in the second game. And I think the other is to broaden our eyes to some degree, or teach us something new on the world or the theme. And all this is in contrast with spiritual successors, mind you. And there are certainly sequels that don't do this, and therefore become iterative. And the reasons why some sequels become the way they are is either due to time constraints, creative burnout, budget, sometimes contractual obligations. Whereas Garden Warfare 2 strikes at what a great sequel should indeed be. It already has established characters and builds from that, and even goes as far as letting you play as the old characters from the first game. They add new content onto itself in form of extra features and storyline. They add a storyline, which is new. And this is where the gaming industry's problem in finding the right balance of new features, whilst also retaining new customers and old, with a degree of satisfaction on both sides. There's been an age-old problem of this, of how do you attract newcomers but also satisfy the old customers. And this being said, not all games have to follow this mindset either. You can focus on old consumers only as like a loyalty reward for the game, or a marketing strategy of, instead of changing the wheel entirely to bring a new audience in. I'm looking at you, Dead Rising, when I say this. And in my personal opinion, I think it's good business practice to strike that balance. Despite most business mantras being, you need to focus on a specific person to tailor your product for, when it comes to an interactive medium such as gaming, I think the idea of there being a target audience is more so for the theming rather than the gameplay. I think it goes more for the mechanics. Jumping in a video game wasn't tailored just for kids. It was tailored on how you play the game, and anyone who understands that A means jump. You know, so going back to Garden Warfare 2, they find this balance, and more specifically, old characters return, as I mentioned earlier. That's for the old players. A welcome mat game mode from the first game for newcomers. a loyalty system built in game for old consumers, and the list goes on of these balances of old players, that's for the new players. And it keeps going on like this. So to conclude this segment simply, Garden Warfare 2 is fundamentally, to its core, a great sequel. Free DLC. Alright, let's talk about DLC for a brief minute. DLC in the past 5 years has changed so much. It ranges from game to game, whether it's free, or it's a season pass, or it's one really big expansion, or 2 little expansions, or sometimes no DLC at all. And to keep us all focused, I'll only be discussing of how Garden Warfare 2 does its DLC, and simply it's free. And you're probably wondering, why am I making such a big fuss over this game doing free DLC? Many others do it, many do it well, and yes, you're right, other games do, but it's an EA title. And for EA, for an EA game to have something free is just mind-blowing to me. I like it, I can't complain, and there's also an argument there for there being an inclusion of microtransactions, which are, must I say, they are the most tame, unnecessary microtransactions in video gaming. I've personally got all characters I've wanted without spending a single penny on the currency. So let's talk about the DLC itself, because it's all fun saying it's free, but to say it's good makes sense, right? So the DLC is called the Trials of Nomus, and how you complete the Trials of Nomus is by completing trials for the Gnome King himself. And in order to do the 4 trials, they are locked away and sealed by 4 doors. In order to unlock the doors, you need 4 keys. In order to get the 4 keys, you need to open 4 chests that open randomly around once every week or so. In order to open the chests, you have to spend 50 rainbow stars on each chest. How do you get rainbow stars? By going through a portal that opens the same time the chests do, and play a series of random game modes, that sort of thing. And that's simply put how you beat the Trials of Nomus. That's it. Not mentioning the prizes at the end, but it sounds convoluted, right? When you explain it, it's go here, fetch this, do this, do this. It sounds monotonous. But all these steps that it has makes it feel like a treasure hunt. And I strongly believe that was what they were going for. Everything in those steps is your doing. If you don't get those rainbow stars, you don't get the chest. You don't get that chest, you don't do the trial, and so on. You really have to work through those steps to get the prize. And it's genius because of how the DLC is set out. Because you can't do all these trials at once. You have to wait a week for the chest to reset, which makes it feel like you're earning the DLC. Inherently, you are earning that DLC. Not just playing it. I've never seen a DLC like this. It feels 10 times more rewarding playing the Trials of Nomus than a DLC that just add things. It's not mind-blowing, no. It's not the best thing in the world, no. But this new practice, a new way of showing how a DLC could be run and it can be released, is really fascinating to me. I often found myself not angry that I'm waiting for the portal to open to get these stars for these keys. I was more excited that the portal was opening in 2 days. And it's a DLC that entices you, it gets you involved, it gets you committed. And that's what gets me excited and kept me playing without feeling that feeling of grind. I think, to conclude this, that PopCap truly understands the audience and just how to balance a DLC and deliver on that. So we have a few quick good points to point out. The customizables, they're fantastic. There's no denying those customizables are the best. I also like the seasonal events, Christmas, Halloween, you name it. They lock down those seasonal events perfectly. They're great. And I also like the Golden Gnome collectibles and that whole thing. That was done brilliantly. I have a stick for collectibles, and they were good collectibles. And so, with all good things, we have to talk about the bad things. Alright, let's just jump into it. So, we've got the maps. The maps themselves feel generic. They really do. Especially when a new map sometimes is just the nighttime equivalent. And they feel rather bland. The best maps in Garden Warfare 2 were the ones on the Gardens and Graveyards type of game mode, where you were taken through a journey through the map, and at the end of the map it would be almost like a boss, and it changed how you would play the game. But all the other maps, like the Suburbanation, Gnome Bomb, all those other game mode maps felt empty. Despite being packed with like objects and details, it just felt bland and just static. It genuinely felt static. The only people who seemed like they were moving was the characters, not the world itself. And I think that comes down to the design of the map itself, because occasionally I would see clumps of players go into a certain area. Like you would see people going up to the roof on the aquarium. Is it the aquarium? You would see most people on that roof than you did anywhere else on that map. And I think it does come down to the map flow and the map design. But this being said, the most promising map I did play that wasn't a Suburbanation was Colosseum. And that was due to how many routes there was to come in and out of the Colosseum. And the Colosseum was the center point. So everyone was going into that center and fighting. But around the Colosseum was about 6 entrances. And it really added this different, you don't know who's coming from which direction. And that really played off well. But all the other maps really didn't play to their strengths. They just felt like a map. Not very memorable at all. And moving on from maps, I want to talk about Gnome Bomb. It's a great concept, but let me explain. Not just Gnome Bomb itself, it's more on the game modes themselves. What PopCap should be looking at is what do people enjoy the most of our game modes. And no doubt, the most popular is the Gardens and Graveyards mode. Why? Because it's new and interesting. It's actually creative. And all the other modes like Suburbanation, Gnome Bomb, Team Vanquish made me say, why am I even playing this on this game when I could be playing it on hundreds of other multiplayer games? And I'm not saying that it all needs to be new, and obviously there's some things that need to be the same, like Team Vanquish. You need a team deathmatch type of game mode. But the good stuff, the best stuff, and the most creative stuff was in the Gardens and Graveyards modes, because they were genuinely creative. One had you sieging a castle, one had you fighting a Zomboss robot, and one had you... You know what, that's a good point. One of the ending, I think it was Moonbase, had each team pushing a ball into the opposing team's pocket, and when you pushed a ball into the goal, you would get a point. If that was a game mode on its own, that would even do well. That's the beauty of PopCap, is they have that creativity. They could have just done that as a game mode, and I think they really should, because it's all good playing the Team Vanquish and all that fun stuff, but it does feel very samey. It doesn't have that same flavour as Gardens and Graveyards. That's what I'm trying to say. And so yeah, the final point is, I do think they could have definitely done more on the game mode side of things. And a final bad point is, it's a very, very niche bad point, and it's that allowing pro players, quotations pro players, to play on Welcome Mat. I strongly believe that a Welcome Mat game mode should be level locked when you reach a certain level, because otherwise it's not a Welcome Mat. It all came from watching my brother play. He's 12 and had nothing but a bad experience playing Welcome Mat. He doesn't even play it anymore. He would rather play Team Vanquish instead of starting on the Welcome Mat, because all the Welcome Mat is better people killing new people. That's all it is, and it just seems silly to me to have a Welcome Mat but have pro players inside that kill you repeatedly. It's not very welcoming to me. The simple way to stop it is to have a level cap, and I don't understand why the level cap's not there in the first place when it's so easily exploitable like that. I would say that level 10 is when it should be locked to, and you can't play, and the only way you could play Welcome Mat is privately. And so that's it. That is all my opinions I have on Garden Warfare 2. So I am indeed curious as to whether you agree or disagree with the things I've said. Please leave them in the comments down below if you agree to disagree. And don't forget to share this video with anyone you actually think would enjoy it. And finally, if you liked it, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. I have been James, and you've just listened to the Simply Put podcast show. Goodbye.